Next, we'd like to move to the panel discussion titled International Cooperation and Competitive Strategy in Sustainability. Please welcome the moderator and panelists for this panel discussion. Please welcome them with a round of applause. Please note that Ms. Jenny Lee, Deputy Secretary General, Hong Kong Green Finance Association, is joining us online. So I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Takegoshi Naomi, Senior Relationship Manager of FinCity.Tokyo. Ms. Takegoshi, the floor is yours.
Welcome to the International Cooperation Competition Strategy panel. I'm Naomi Takegoshi, FinCity.Tokyo's Senior Relationship Manager. And as Morita-san mentioned in his opening speech, that one of FinCity.Tokyo's remits included maintaining relationship with overseas financial hubs. I'm really pleased to be able to present this panel with speakers from overseas embassies in Tokyo and Jenny, who's joining online. So this session, titled Cooperation Competition Strategy, sustainable finance has become a very important facet for financial services of all major financial hubs. And they have been sharpening their focus, carrying out lots of innovation, becoming a center of choice for sustainable finance. So there is that competition element. But in earlier sessions, we did discuss some of the challenges facing sustainability finance. Therefore, cooperation is also essential. So we will be looking at that, how financial hubs can work together to push the world towards net zero. So let me please introduce the panelists I have for this panel. So firstly, His Excellency Ambassador Michel Lisch of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. And next to him, Mr. Ronald Borlander, Economic and Finance Council of the British Embassy in Tokyo. And joining us via video is Ms. Jenny Lee, Deputy Secretary General of the Hong Kong Green Finance Association. Oh, Jenny, thanks very much for joining. So, before kicking off, the Osaka Expo concluded 2 days ago successfully. And I know expos must have been highlights of embassies this year. Maybe you're feeling a bit of already banpaku losu, as we say, missing it already. Well, yeah, please do share with us any sustainability elements messaging you had for your pavilions and how they were received by the Japanese audience. So, Ambassador, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you, Naomi-san, and thank you and to FinCity.Tokyo for this invitation. And first of all, allow me to congratulate the Japanese authorities for the success of the Banpaku. It's a huge success with 28 million visitors, and I think we also have to dedicate this success to the commitment of the many Japanese visitors that came to visit the expo, including the Luxembourg pavilion. I was there on Monday for the closing event, and it was still the number of people that was impressive. So, with regard to the Luxembourg pavilion, indeed, the sustainability was at the very heart of the concept, and the concept was based on was intended to be circular by design. Circular by design means that from the very early stage on of designing, planning your pavilion, your building, you are introducing principle of circular economy. So which means that instead of adopting like a linear, modular approach where you take resources, you make something, and then you produce waste, you aim at having a system that is using from the start the resources as efficiently as possible, and then you can recover, reuse, or just regenerate these resources. And so basically the circularity will be implemented through using materials that were used to build the pavilion. And let me give you an example. So our pavilion has a roof like a tent. It's a membrane, and out of this membrane we will do kind of designer bags. So they will be completely, the membrane, this roof will be completely used to produce bags. And so there was possibility to buy it on pre-sale, and I was told that the pre-sale is closed. It's no need to be closed, so even I forgot to make my order, so I have to negotiate something. I hope, but don't quote me on that. And just to show that we were also meaning business on this, is that we were very grateful and honored that last Sunday we received a sustainability award by the Bureau International des Expositions, that is the coordinating entity for expos, and so Luxembourg Pavilion has received the prize of being the most sustainable self-built pavilion, which is less than 1,500 square meters.
Wow. Thank you. Many congratulations for that award. So can I ask the same question to Ron?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for having me. So, I mean, similarly to the Luxembourg Pavilion, I think the UK Pavilion, we took our cue from the Osaka Expo organizers' sort of vision for it to be, as sustainable of an expo as it can possibly be. So, similarly, as we just heard from the ambassador here, we also embraced a modular design, so to make sure that key components that were used in the construction of our pavilion could be efficiently relocated post-expo, so whether that's floor plates, external cladding, some of the internal design choices. But rather than maybe explaining more about the building itself, actually, I think when it comes to this sort of sustainability and what the UK believes in this space, I think it was very much part of our sort of the theme of our pavilion in of itself, in terms of the visitor experience that visitors who had the chance to come to the UK Pavilion were able to see. So our theme of the UK Pavilion was come and build the future, come build the future. So, and the whole idea is that, as the history of the UK has shown, it's sort of a marketplace of ideas where small ideas that, we might have as children or as we grow and develop our careers, exchange those ideas with other like-minded partners, that these small ideas bouncing off each other could create something bigger. And I think so basically how small ideas can turn into bigger ideas that are then become world-changing. And it feels like that's the sort of thing that actually is very apt given the current challenge of sustainability, where actually we need many small ideas and get them to scale, to the scale necessary to meet the challenges of combating global climate change. And in terms of how it's been received by the Japanese public, I mean, we were very pleased by it's very having seen the queues outside the UK Pavilion, not nearly as long as some other pavilions, I must admit, but equally it's very nice to see how interested people were in that concept. And I think last time I checked, we had 1.2 million visitors to the UK Pavilion before it closed. So we're very delighted by the attention it received.
Well, congratulations both on the great success you had at your pavilions. And now let me introduce Jenny to the audience. So Jenny, I'm sorry we could not welcome you this time in person, but thanks so much for making yourself available from Hong Kong online. So I'm new to HKGFA, Hong Kong Green Finance Association. Could you please give us an introduction of your organization?
Sure. And thank you again so much to Japan FinCity for the kind invitation and to Naomi-san for moderating this panel. My name is Jenny. I'm the Deputy Secretary General for the Hong Kong Green Finance Association. We were established in 2018 and very much in so doing was to mobilize public and private sector collaboration with the vision and mission to developing Hong Kong as a leading green and sustainable finance hub. And we work very closely with our local governments, regional governments, policymakers, regulators, financial institutions, and also international organizations, really with the view to accelerate the flow of capital towards low carbon and nature positive transition. We have over 160 Hong Kong-based institutional members. Over 60% are financial institutions, insurers, asset managers, and sustainability market service providers. And so very much representative of the whole ecosystem. And our work focuses primarily on policy and market development, capacity building on the following key thematics, which is transition finance, sustainable finance product innovation, which includes nature and biodiversity, green fintech solutions, real estate, sustainability disclosures, and the Greater Bay Area integration. I would say we are one of the oldest and most active sustainable finance associations in the region. We've organized and supported over 100 sustainability-related events annually, and we've trained over 15,000 participants in the region in over 20 countries in sustainable finance. One other thing to note is that in Hong Kong, we work with global organizations. We are the co-convener for Task Force for Nature for Financial Disclosures. We are also the Hong Kong representative for the UN Financial Centers for Sustainability, and we're also a member of the Global Capacity Building Alliance, which is a global alliance that brings together UN agencies, MDBs, DFIs, and private sectors, again with the mission to enhance capacity for EMDs, emerging markets and developing economies. And I would say one final thing is that we are a founding member of the Greater Bay Area Green Finance Alliance, which includes other member associations in Shenzhen, Macau, and Guangdong. And so we are very delighted to be able to share our work with you today, and also to see how we can bring greater collaboration within the region across different platforms. So thank you for the introduction.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for introducing HKGFA. Right, I'm going to do this discussion in, I suppose, two steps. First, we will look at how these hubs have been working on sustainable finance and what it does. And then looking at the future, what their ambitions are towards the future, and how Japan could work with them. And finally, looking at COP30 as an immediate large forum that is coming up for climate finance diplomacy. So now let's look at the present, or maybe, shall we say, from the past to the present, on how your centers have developed sustainable finance. So what has been the vision, and who were the actors involved, and what have you achieved so far? We will be looking at that. Starting with Jenny, yes, can I ask HKGFA's story around that?
No, that's great. No, thank you for the question. I would say Hong Kong's sustainable finance markets have been developing and evolving very rapidly with the strong support from the government and also the regulators and private sector through a series of fiscal incentives and also regulatory clarity on climate-related disclosures and standards and initiatives to really enable and foster market infrastructure development. And so if we look back at some of the key initiatives that have been undertaken in Hong Kong to create this kind of baseline for market standard. The Hong Kong government launched a green bond program in 2018. Its primary purpose was to create this market, mobilize capital for environmentally impactful projects, set industry standards for issuance, and also to harness global investor interest and awareness and encourage adoption across the whole ecosystem. And as of 2024, Hong Kong has issued over $84 billion worth of green and sustainable debt from the Hong Kong markets. And that's across multiple currencies and duration and different forms in terms of tokenization. The second area that the Hong Kong government has really focused on is really looking at grants and incentives to encourage issuers to use the Hong Kong capital markets through subsidizing the issuance fees, verification, certification, external review costs, to really encourage issuers to use Hong Kong as that platform for green bond issuance and to accelerate the market growth. And in 2024, the subsidy was not only extended for another 3 years, but it was expanded to include new activities such as transition bonds and loans. Another incentive is really to look at how we can build up the local talent, upskill the sustainable finance ecosystem by providing sustainable finance training subsidies from approved program providers. And to date, the government has approved and issued 42 million Hong Kong dollars of subsidies to the local talent and professionals here. Thirdly, in terms of another grant, is very much looking at technology. So in order for us to be able to really provide green solutions and green fintech solutions, the government has also issued a proof of concept scheme whereby they have provided subsidies and grants to over 60 projects that have been approved to ensure green fintech solutions that enable sustainability reporting, data, and capital mobilizations are enabled for off-takers. In terms of regulatory clarity, the regulators have provided very clear roadmaps for sustainability and disclosure development for the players here in Hong Kong. Hong Kong now has a path to full adoption of the IFRS, ISSB, which are the International Sustainability Standards Board, S1 and S2, for listed companies, with 2025 being the first reporting period. The second regulatory clarity comes from the launch of the Hong Kong Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, which is that combination and of the common ground taxonomy aligned with China and EU to really increase transparency and mitigate greenwashing. And the third area is really the Hong Kong Monetary Authority has published a sustainable finance action agenda to encourage banks to really step up the transition planning, looking at key targets which include how to get to net zero operations by 2030 and the reductions of financed emissions in their portfolios by 2050. And so for Hong Kong, we've really taken this whole ecosystem approach where we have encouraged and enabled public and private sector collaboration, coordination, and consultation. And I think this has really enabled Hong Kong to look ahead and to achieve its vision from 2018 forward, and looking ahead to continuing to grow the markets in new products, in new initiatives, and such that we now account for 45% of the region's total Asian green bond market. We have over $139 billion of AUM for the Securities Futures Commission's authorized ESG funds. And I think in terms of our focus, I think we will continue to look at the impact of green technology and AI as an enabler for accelerating the mobilization of capital to sustainable finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive introduction. Lots to consume. I can see there's a very steady dialogue between HKMA and the private sector players under your wings. the subsidy program, Tokyo metropolitan government has something similar, I believe, to help issuers, including the small and medium companies for whom green bond issuance could be something a little bit inaccessible to make that easier. So it was interesting to see that similarity and a lot of government money being invested in supporting the activities and human talents and the innovation, the POCs that you're doing with fintech startups. That's very exciting. Is that open to foreign players as well?
Yes, we have issued, I guess together with the HKMA, have issued like a green fintech competition, which actually was open to all global fintech solution providers, whereby we opened up 5 different categories to have and showcase the winners in each. And so I think as a platform, Hong Kong is very open, and through our Invest Hong Kong, I guess, networks, to encourage actually the foreign talent and also technological talents to come and to set up offices here, such that we can provide support either from a financing or even like office space, etc., identify new talents. I think we, as a city-state, are very open to encouraging that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask the same question to Ambassador Lish. We have very much enjoyed the interaction with your embassy over the years, and one reason we're inviting you is that we had the opportunity, myself and a few colleagues had the opportunity to actually visit Luxembourg and see it firsthand how closely knit the players are, almost rendering themselves as Team Luxembourg. Yes. That's the impression I got. Maybe it's a bit similar to Hong Kong, again, a small market where players work together very closely. But yes, let me ask you how Luxembourg has been spearheading sustainability and the journey to date.
Okay, thank you very much. Indeed, in Luxembourg, everybody knows everybody. I'll divide my answers my answer to your question in 3 parts. So first, the mission statement, the vision, but this is something I think we all share here, where we came from and where we are. So the mission statement is quite clear. We want to deliver meaningful impact by embedding sustainability and inclusivity into the heart of finance, and ensure that economic growth goes hand in hand with social, environmental priorities. And so our journey for this did not begin yesterday. In fact, Luxembourg was it began in the 90s, when Luxembourg was one of the pioneers in Europe in the area of inclusive finance, microfinance. We were the first to establish microfinancial institutions, and today 1/3 of the microfinance investment vehicles are based in Luxembourg, and this 1/3 of vehicles is managing over half of the global assets under management in this sector. So inclusivity was the start, and it seemed all natural to us to move towards sustainability. So now, with regard to the ecosystem, there are 4 fundamental pillars to this ecosystem. And the first pillar is the coordination of our sustainable finance environment. And there in 2020, we established a public-private partnership called Luxembourg Sustainable Finance Initiative, which acts as the central coordinator, the knowledge hub and center of excellence for everything touching on sustainable finance in Luxembourg. And so the LSFE's mission is to build expertise, mobilize the financial sector, monitor progress, and ensure that efforts remain coherent and impactful. Second pillar, fundamental pillar, is the market infrastructure. So, and that is the Luxembourg Green Exchange. It was launched 10 years ago, and it is the world's first platform entirely dedicated to green financial instruments. So the LGX, Luxembourg Green Exchange, provides trust and transparency by making all mandatory documents, including external review, freely available. Today, it is hosting 2,000, I think more than 2,200 labeled bonds and over 3,800 sustainable securities. So it's a benchmark. It's really a benchmark. Third fundamental pillar of our ecosystem is the Sustainable Fund Hub. So Luxembourg is the leading hub for sustainable investment funds in Europe. So we are hosting 34% of assets in sustainable finance, and we've seen an increase over the past year of 14.1%. So in Europe, 27% of sustainable finance managers are based in Luxembourg. And so what we've seen beyond traditional deregulated investment funds is the growth of private markets. And so we have expanded, we have now embarked into this journey, and now we saw with ESG asset, environment, sustainable governance assets, we saw a growth at compound annual rate, let me check, of 95.2% between 2019 and 23. So that was led by private equity, infrastructure, real estate, and private debt. So altogether, also with a new European regime on alternative investment funds, that's the LTIF 2.0, that's the European Long-Term Investment Fund. I think we're well positioned to continue growing in this area. Last but not least, you are all the experts, you know how important labeling is for credibility and trust. And we have a non-profit organization called LuxFlag. It's the Luxembourg Finance Labeling Agency, and this organization, it applies rigorous labeling standards to financial products. So you know, as an investor, that the product you're investing in meets the sustainability requirements. With that comes credibility and better informed decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much for capturing the history which goes back to the 1990s with the microfinance funds generated from Luxembourg. And also your reference to private assets in the ESG space. It shows the foresight, I think, as nowadays everyone's talking about private assets. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing that with us. So now let me invite Ron from the UK Embassy to share with us the UK's journey so far. The City of London and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, they have an MOU which has been updated just last month. So we are very interested always to look at how the UK is working on various new initiatives. So over to you, Ron.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi, for that. I mean, so let me also sort of take this, my answer to your questions of 3 parts, and maybe focus on London and the UK as a marketplace. Going back to my point around our pavilion being a marketplace for ideas, I think that very much also applies to the UK's credibility in green finance. Secondly, about the sort of our approach on standards and thought leadership. And then thirdly, on the sort of importance of data and analytics and sort of market-driven developments. So all of these 3 things are very core to the UK's sort of role as a global financial center, but importantly as a role in its role as a global center for green finance and sustainable finance. So yes, our own history also goes back, I'd say, probably at least 2 decades in the sort of to some extent related to the global financial crisis, where a lot of questions were being asked about what's the purpose of financial services, and people kind of taking a hard look in the mirror and sort of saying, well, actually, ultimately, what's the purpose of a financial center or financial services? It's meant to respond to the needs of the real economy. So as we're looking at what does the next what do we need from our economies down the line? So helping them respond to the challenges of climate change will require raising the funds, clearly, to support new innovations in renewable energy, but also, as I'm sure we'll get onto, transition finance more recently. But let me just give you a few sort of stats and sort of facts. I mean, London has consistently ranked at the top of sort of global green finance index. So I think it's come top at the last 8 editions of the Yen Global Green Finance Index, and we've made our mark with many firsts in the space. First G20 country to make TCFD, so aligned disclosures mandatory in 2020. First stock exchange to launch voluntary carbon market designation. First jurisdiction to launch a transition plan task force. And a few other things. There's probably too many to mention, but I think ultimately it comes down to I think London being a sort of ecosystem of ecosystems. So it's not just the financial institutions themselves, it's the sort of all the bits that sit around making a sustainable project happen. The accountancy, the insurance, the consultancy services, they all come together in London, unlike in possibly other places, other global places. It's very hard to sort of beat that sort of history of having all those things at the same place. But then, of course, if we think about standards and thought leadership, I think we can point to the sort of the regulators, so whether it's the FCA or the Bank of England. And people might remember Mark Carney, now Prime Minister of Canada, but in previous guises also the governor of the Bank of England, being quite a very solid proponent on behalf of the UK, but also globally speaking to setting standards on disclosure. I can point to the UK Green Finance Institute, the UK Centre for Green Finance and Investment, or even just if you're talking about academia, the London School of Economics. Grantham Research Institute on climate change, and I think the Stern Review, which again might ring a bell with some people in this room, hopefully, sort of thought leadership around, well, the data is real, the financial world needs to wake up to the risks that emerge from climate change and need to respond to that. So those are all things that sort of the UK has worked on and has tried to make a mark on. And then when it comes to data and so basically given all of that, I think we had quite a long time to think about how we want to, sort of. I think our vision of sort of our approach to green finance and sustainability is sort of not to be blindly guided by setting rules that don't have actual real impact. In terms of, I think we've always been sort of market-led, but sort of regulators have been listening to the market in terms of what is actually necessary to drive activity, and a lot of it just came down to the data demonstrating that there's a cost of you not doing anything, so therefore you should do something. And that was actually driving energy rather than just sort of creating new standards just for the sake of standards. And then I think the other thing where maybe it's just an interesting sort of contrast to I think some of the experience that we've heard just today, but also we're aware of from other centers, is this question about rulemaking versus basically mandation versus sort of voluntary disclosures, right? So not necessarily claiming as the regulator or policymaker that we know what the right answer is, but actually working with industry to define, to continuously refine what good or what the best of, what does good look like today, because that might look different from what good looks like tomorrow, and not being set to, again, terms of black and white standards. So I think that's very much the approach from the UK, and I think that's also the reason why we have probably not gone down the route of subsidy, because I think we've sort of, I think the UK's approach very much is sort of almost slightly ironically, for sustainable finance market to be sustainable in its own right, it should be sustainable without subsidy. And therefore, if we set the market and create the market conditions for it to take off, that shouldn't require subsidy, although I think I also understand why in some cases it makes sense. But I think from our UK approach, we've decided not to do that. So yeah, maybe let me just stop there, because I think there's a few other things that I probably will revert to later in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ron. Great that you mentioned the Stern review. I remember Lord Stern visiting Japan during my time at the UK Embassy and taking him to meet the KIHARA. Yes, and there he was presenting a study, a very data-based, fact-based study on what climate change, how climate change can impact the economy and what businesses should be doing and so on. So it was great to hear about that. And in terms of innovation, well, the EU had the emissions trade scheme, but I thought that the UK was quite involved, instrumental in kind of designing the credit trading mechanism. Am I right?
Yes, but then it's sort of I think actually on the back of the Stern review there was this actually this sort of, I guess, this sort of academic thinking behind what, setting up a carbon trading system, why that is economically efficient. So this sort of, let's say, intellectual heft behind it. Certainly, I think you can directly link to the Stern review and of course, Professor Stern himself. But then, yes, to some extent, being involved in this sort of global thought leadership about international carbon trading schemes. I think certainly, even to this day, the UK takes a very active role in. But obviously, given our sort of role as sort of sitting next to Europe or next to the EU, but outside the EU now, obviously our approach has slightly evolved from perhaps where we were, where that thinking was maybe 10 years ago.
Thank you very much. Okay, then now let's look at the future. So we've heard a lot about what you've been working on so far and what you have achieved. So are there any opportunities or themes that your center is actively pursuing or experimenting? I mean, some things that come to my mind, it would include like biodiversity or transition finance, or I suppose there are many other things, but any new areas that you're looking towards the future, and in that pursuit, how can Japanese institutions work with you? So that would be my next question. Can I start with Ron to answer that?
Yes, I mean, as I sort of mentioned, I think the latest sort of emphasis. Let me, before I get into transition finance, because I know that's the hot topic, is actually, I think, again, where our thinking has evolved through our experience of market practice is just to explain how we ended up with transition finance, I think collectively, but also particularly in the UK, is that, just going back to this point I made around, we want to make sure that financial services react to a real economic need. And I think there was a recognition that it was all well and good for us to kind of say, something is either green or it's not, and look at it somewhat black and white, when actually the reality is, of course, that, yes, in some cases, of course, ambition, countries or institutions or sectors can be more ambitious than they might have been, but there's also just hard reality that hard to abate sectors, you can't just shut off your energy-intensive industry from today and tomorrow. So actually there is a real gap in the sort of transition planning, and that needs to be met by finance to back it. So I think that is why we've, similar to other centers, I think we've also ended up in looking at transition finance as a as a gap that needed to be addressed. So which is why I think as the UK, I think so the recent emphasis on the UK's Transition Finance Council, which is now chaired by Lord Albert Sharma, which again, a name hopefully familiar to some in the room, the UK COP president for when we hosted COP, but previously also a senior member of the UK government. Where the Transition Finance Council is now actively looking at creating a roadmap and recommendations on the back of a transition finance market review, which was published in the UK in October 2024, and setting a roadmap for how the UK can implement some of those recommendations. But basically, the aims are threefold. So it's helping create credible global transition guidelines, supporting investable sector roadmaps, and then thirdly, to have models that are scalable. Because I think, again, going back to this point around, it's easy to sit there from a more sort of academic or policy-making perspective and go, well, you should be funding, you should stop funding coal and you should fund renewables, to make it very simplistic. But actually, what do you do if you from the conversations we've had with industry, lots of industries said, yes, we want to get to a space where we can only do green, but actually there's this sort of gray area in between for which we need finance. So this is, I think, that was sort of the origin that then the UK ended up the UK responding to that fact by creating this Transition Finance Council. So that work is ongoing. So the Transition Finance Guidelines are actually currently up for consultation. So going to the point for international, where we can sort of work with international partners. I think when it comes to Transition Finance Guidelines or any market activity really on sustainability, I think the starting point of the UK has always been outward-looking in terms of making sure that whatever guidelines or markets that we create, that they're interoperable with other markets, whether that's the EU or, of course, but also the US and Asian markets. Is that how can we make sure that our guidelines or markets can talk to each other? And make sure that there isn't a sort of lost in translation, because ultimately we're all trying to get to the same space, and any one of our markets are not going to be, well, certainly on the UK's behalf, the UK market in its own right is not large enough to raise the kind of money that we're talking about that is necessary to drive sustainable change. And then the other thing which we've been working on, or is actively being worked on, is the sector transition roadmaps. So scaling, so basically coming up with detailed national and sector-specific pathways, very similar to actually what's happening in Japan. So I think to some extent it's going in two ways, where the UK is also looking at Japan and thinking of, what is the Japanese government, what is Japanese regulators, what are Japanese policymakers and thinkers doing on transition finance, because I think there's a lot the UK can learn as well from how Japan has implemented some of these sort of concepts in its own rulemaking. And again, on the sector transition roadmaps, that is also coming up for consultation and will be published in draft form. So again, if this is an open invitation, both on the transition finance guidelines from the UK, but also the sector transition roadmaps, that anyone is able to respond to our consultation, and it's open at the moment. So please do feed in your thoughts, which we would very much welcome. And if you'd like to have a conversation, please do let me know after this panel as well. I'm very happy to kind of connect you to the relevant authorities back home. So yeah, let me stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much for mentioning transition finance, which is something that caught FinCity.Tokyo's attention. You know, in this today's forum too, there has been previously a lot of discussion about do we want to go for the hard way of just investing in green, or what we're going to do with the high-intensity sectors. And we need a more realistic approach. So Japan has been advocating that, and we have heard in previous panels that at first it was kind of dismissed by the international community as washing, but it's more understanding and support in that school of thought. And it's great that the UK is working on that. And yes, we have also seen the guidelines, the draft. So it's great to be invited to look at it. And I think someone in the earlier panel was saying that in APAC alone, you have like 43 taxonomies. We don't want further kind of ESG soup with different standards. So I think it'd be really great if Japan and the UK could work together on that transition finance guidelines standards in the future. So thank you very much for your comments. So now may I please ask Ambassador Leash for, yes, your outlook for the future and Luxembourg's ambition for the future and how Japan might be able to work together there.
Thank you very much. So on our ambitions for the future, let me start by something that we are doing now, and that is education. We need to prepare the leadership on sustainable finance. We need to have people with the right skills and the proper knowledge. And so the University of Luxembourg has a master's program and a certificate on sustainable finance. And so here also in a few steps, our ambitions. So in line with our mission statement and vision. So first it's to continue mobilizing capital for sustainable growth. So the first priority is to mobilize private capital at scale. So we have the market infrastructure, we have the sustainable investment funds, this hub. And so with this, we want to continue mainstreaming sustainable finance and provide investors with credible, transparent tools. And then the partnership between public and private capital is very important. We need to offer blending solutions. Luxembourg is working with many partners at this level, notably the European Investment Bank. And so blending and working together will help us work and accelerate progress on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, in infrastructure, clean energy, or social development. And then also, I think it's been said, it's the driving, so we need regulation. We need regulation that helps, but we also need innovation. So innovation and technology are central. So probably one of the biggest challenges is ESG data. So that information about the company's performances in key areas of sustainability. And we believe that by applying AI, distributed ledger technology, and advanced data sharing frameworks, we can aim at making sustainability claims more transparent, verifiable, and trusted. So I will come back to fintech and green tech in just in a moment. And also we need to go, I think that's also been said with regard to transition finance, go beyond just green. So Luxembourg came from inclusivity, microfinance to sustainable finance. And now we are scaling up impact investment in areas such as gender finance, biodiversity, blue economy, and also transition finance, of course. And I also might say a word about a gateway that we have established to help investors navigate through the transition finance. So at the same time, still going beyond the green products, we need to develop innovative instruments from green securitization to sustainability, linked loans and bonds, as well as dedicated impact funds. When it comes to Japan, of course, Japanese financial institutions have been established in Luxembourg for many decades, making banking, asset management, and capital markets. And we've seen Japanese securities displayed on the Luxembourg Green Exchange. So there are quite a few. I will not name them. But this list shows that there is really, when it comes to cooperation between Japan and Luxembourg, a strong foundation and for future growth. And then we're entering the area of technology, where Luxembourg has a hub for fintech with supporting green tech startups. I think also with digital skills here in Japan, we can combine expertise in finance with technological skills to deliver cross-market solutions. For example, AI-driven ESG analytics. We're coming back to the accountability, to knowing in which product you can trust, and also blockchain-based verification tools. A partnership with our labeling organization in order to label Japanese products, sustainable products, to distribute them globally. That is very much possible, and we should go into that area. And last but not least, also we've spoken about the importance of private markets, and so also there we see private equity and else we see area for growth. Maybe just on the transition finance, this is really an important issue here in Japan. So we launched an initiative called the Transition Finance Gateway, and it was established to enhance transparency, clarity, comparability, and harmonization in climate transition finance. So we are working with the unique expertise of 4 data providers, and so the aim is to give insights into the progress that non-financial corporate debt issuers have made on the respective transition journey. So this was launched by the Luxembourg Stock Exchange. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, transparency and comparability, that actually came a lot in earlier sessions on transition finance. So yeah, it's great to hear that you are addressing these challenges by leveraging tech like AI and DLT. Yeah. Thanks so much. Jenny, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm going to ask you the same question on the future that Hong Kong's looking at and how Japanese institutions could play a role.
Great, no, thank you. I would say we echo similar themes to both the UK and also to Luxembourg. Transition finance plays a significant role for us, particularly given where Hong Kong sits as that connector between mainland China and the rest of the world, and then the need, I guess, for the decarbonization for some of these harder to abate sectors within mainland China and elsewhere in the region. So what we are doing, we are actually working and collaborating not just within Hong Kong ecosystem, but also globally as well. So we do speak to the UK consulate here in Hong Kong. We also are informed by the TPT in the UK. We do draw on our experience from from our Japanese institutional members that we work with here in terms of their transition planning pathways, looking at certain sectors and really drawing on their knowledge and expertise to help shape and inform kind of our members and our constituents and stakeholders here. Some of the other areas in terms of transition finance that we have been looking at and continue to work on is looking at developing credible transition pathways. I think it's still very complex and nuanced by sector, by company, and there is definitely a demand to have certain sector pathways and looking at how we can operationalize a lot of these principles and frameworks. And so we are working very closely with the private sector and the government and regulators to really provide that information and knowledge share. Another area is on kind of green definitions, that interoperability. The adoption of the ISSB will help with ensuring and mitigating greenwashing. But through our sustainable finance taxonomy, we realize that it's very much a living document. It's not a define an activity and then leave it within a report that it's referenced. So we are moving through a series of phases where we bring additional activities within the Hong Kong Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, and transition will be one of those that we are currently reviewing and in consultation with the market. I would also say one other thing is for the GFA, our chairman and president, Dr. Martin, was also the former G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group head and was very instrumental in the G20 transition finance principles and framework. And so again, that becomes very much a core of what the GFA does, and in terms of how we leverage global international standards to create this interoperability. In addition to transition finance, I think Luxembourg was mentioned in terms of blended finance. That for us also is an area of focus, looking at how we can create partnerships with other MDBs and also public and private sector partnerships, and really to establish financing mechanisms to help really address some of these other solutions for climate adaptation or climate resilience in emerging markets. And I feel that that is kind of like still for us anyway within Hong Kong a starting point. So in November last year, the HKMA entered into a partnership with actors on the Asia Climate Fund that pulls together both the IFC, ADB, AIIB for climate transition projects for the emerging markets. I think this is a great starting point. I think we can work together more regionally with other development finance institutions, with other commercial players, and other countries as well to build that capacity. I think there is a lot we can learn from each other. We are all at different stages within kind of like the journey of sustainable financing, and being able to share experiences, particularly around how some of these structuring mechanisms work, which are very technical, I think will be very beneficial as well. And lastly, I think nature and biodiversity, when we look at kind of, you can't de-link climate and nature, whilst it's still, again, a very nascent theme, I find, particularly in Asia. I think with the adoption of ISSB, the fact that TNFD has been aligned with TCFD, I think that this will accelerate much quicker. And I think, again, we can leverage off knowledge partners like in Japan, who are like pioneers in transition bonds, nature financing, a lot of this blended finance solutions that we see, and then assess like how can we work more closely together in this knowledge share. We, as GFA, also work closely with other sustainable finance associations like, Singapore, Australia, and Mongolia. So we'd love to open up the platform to work with others as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for your comments. And actually, time's pressing on, and I'm conscious that we need to wrap up in a few few minutes. So very, very finally, yeah, we saw some of the challenges facing sustainable finance earlier, that it's being politicized, creating almost divide, has some repercussions like, banks exiting some of these green net zero alliances. So there are all these challenges. And so I suppose overcoming that challenge is the power of diplomacy. And we've got COP30 coming up, so in Belém, Brazil. So just, yes, sorry, 1 minute each from each of you on what you'd like to achieve at COP30, your respective countries. Thank you. So, shall we start with Ron?
Yeah, well, gosh, in 1 minute. So, I mean, I think in terms of, just on the point about the politicization of green finance, obviously that's a real challenge. But I think what I would just say, and I think what's recognized by most people, is that the real market dynamics the underlying market dynamics haven't changed, right? And I think the starting point has always been, don't do something because it meets a label, do something because it actually has a real economic impact. So, and, if you could even just look at the U.S. state of Texas has become, quietly become a capital in renewable energy, right? Which you wouldn't have thought looking at the sort of the headline messages. But just going to COP, I think, as the UK going into COP, I think our overall ambition hasn't changed from, also a legacy of our own COP presidency. We want to maintain ambition on keeping the 1.5 degrees alignment alive, even though it's become more challenging. But for that to be alive, I think transition plans, credible transition plans, have a role to play. The other important aspect for us at the same time is adaptation, because I think many countries, there's not enough money flowing to adaptation that the challenge requires. So again, the bankability of adaptation will be a big focus for the UK amongst some of the other priorities. But let me just stop there.
Ambassador, would you like to go next?
Yes, very quickly, as the challenges have been mentioned, ESG is not a passing trend. It is there to stay. ESG principles have shaped market for over 2 decades. They remain rooted in risk management, systemic risk management, fiduciary duty, and long-term value creation. And if they pursue on that route together with smart regulation and digital innovation, it's there to stay. We just need to keep our eyes on the long-term interest, on the net zero, also in the interest of our clients. So on the COP, very quickly, the EU is working on its targets. We remain ambitious. We are working together to have our new targets. We need to evaluate how to balance our ambitions with competitiveness, and also to see how to balance between regions and sectors. But we aim for strengthening the targets, for implementing the Paris Agreement and mobilizing finance. It is the EU, it's the European Commission that is doing the negotiation, and Luxembourg will support the EU Commission in this target. Thank you.
Thank you. So the final question to you, Jenny, about your organization's involvement with the upcoming COP.
Yes, thank you. I think for Hong Kong, we remain focused and very much on client commitments. And we will be, Hong Kong will be together with China in the China Pavilion. And I think really in terms of the focus, we'll be looking at forward-looking guidance, looking at how we can close the gaps in terms of standards, readiness and information, and also talents. And very much looking at how we can build capacity in the global South markets where it's most needed. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think we managed to discuss quite a lot in this 1 hour panel. So I would like to thank the panelists for kindly joining us. And Jenny, hopefully we will see you next time in Tokyo. There was so much to take in from your comments. Thank you very much. So this concludes my this panel. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for your contribution.
Thank you very much. The moderator and panelists, please give them a round of applause, please.